When it comes to some of the greatest series in gaming, what if I said that question was a lot more difficult to answer than you may think? Naturally, this question would bring me to my top 5, which are as such: The Binding of Isaac, Blaster Master Zero, Super Meat Boy, Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Bayonetta 1. Now, all of these are indeed great series, but the greatest series of all time, that's debatable. The Binding of Isaac is definitely my favorite game of all time, bar none. But can I really call it a series when 2 out of 3 games are basically the same and one is just some random spin-off? Not to say that any of those games are bad, because I do like them all. But when I think of the greatest series of all time, I'm thinking of a long-running franchise. Sure, Blaster Master is a long-running franchise, but also, they made Blaster Master Zero for a reason. Which leaves arguably only one series: Smash Bros. Well renowned for its multiplayer fun, I think it's definitely a solid contender. But there's another franchise, not even in my top 5 games of all time, that completely eclipses all of these. But you clicked on the video, so you probably already know what it is. But regardless, I think it's time we talk about it. The legendary franchise that is Mega Man. Since the dawn of time, Mega Man is a series that I've held near and dear to my heart. Although it's not until recently where I finally found the time to play every Mega Man game. Interestingly enough, I didn't even start with the classic series or Mega Man X. I actually started with the Zero series. I already knew Inti Creates' work because I played Blaster Master Zero, but also Azure Striker Gunvolt, which was a blast. So I decided to start with the Zero series first, and let me tell you, those are some fun games. But we're not talking Zero today. By the time I got around to the Zero series, I had already completed a few classic Mega Man games, touched one X game, but that's really about it. I played the first 2 Mega Man games, and then the last 2 Mega Man games, and also 10 was made by Inti Creates, so I already had lots of reason to start with the Zero series. But I have a YouTube channel now, so I thought it'd be fun to go back to every single Mega Man game and give it a review. I know X6 is... I don't want to talk about it, please. But like I said, we're only focusing on the classic series today. And playing them in 2025 can be a little difficult. Most of these games were released on the NES, decades-old hardware and hardware I sadly don't have. There's also the Wii Virtual Console release, which I do actually own, but they also put this weird dark filter over it and it looks really bad. I don't know why you couldn't disable it, but regardless, that was nearly 15 years ago. I guess Nintendo can't do anything about that now. So that leaves pretty much one answer as to how I'm playing all these games today. For the sake of consistency, we're sticking to the Rockman Legacy Collection, which is an emulation of the first 6 Mega Man games ready to go for you. In terms of emulation, it's mostly faithful to the NES releases. The same glitches, the same slowdown, and the same level design, basically one-to-one with the NES version. Although with emulation, there are some very slight benefits compared to playing on an actual NES, like save states and rapid fire. And actually, with the Nintendo Switch version, and then every platform from there on, they decided to add rewind, which was a pretty neat feature. But the biggest change of all, and one that made the video actually kind of nice to watch, was the removal of slowdown. They did this by overclocking the emulator, and in some games that can cause issues. But in the Mega Man Legacy Collection, I pretty much had no problems with it overall. Hell, if you like the slowdown for whatever reason, you can still turn it on, so it's a win-win. But the Legacy Collection isn't the only way to play Mega Man. For example, the Rock Band Completes works on PlayStation, which is pretty much just a ground-up port of the originals, nothing spectacular, but from what I've heard, it gets the job done. There's also the Anniversary Collection, which is pretty much the Legacy Collection except for PS2 and GameCube. And the iOS version should not have existed. But none of that will be factored in. I'm just assessing how the games were meant to be played, which is on the Legacy Collection. Obviously disregarding rewinds and save states. So anyways, I think it's time we head in. This is Mega Man 1 for the NES. Coming hot off the trails of the arcade market, Capcom was a dominating force in the 80s. But eventually the Famicom and NES rolled around, and eventually become a focal system for Capcom. Sure, they still made arcade games, but with the NES, players finally had a method to play games that were at least close to the arcade as you can get in the 80s. But the desire to create a home console game eventually came up. As great as the arcades are as a platform, so was the home console market. You could create endlessly replayable games whilst having equal to or more quality than one arcade game. This is where Mega Man was born. Akira Kitamura was responsible for all the character design of Mega Man, but Keiji Inafune was responsible for the illustrations in-game. All in all, Mega Man was developed by a small yet humble team of about 6 or so people who seek to make the best game they could make. Oops. Mega Man 1 is a rather infamous game. It's often regarded as one of the hardest NES games of all time, but also one that's considered to have aged a bit, especially compared to the other Mega Man sequels on the NES. So with this, you'd expect me to hate Mega Man 1, right? Honestly, I really enjoyed Mega Man 1. Granted, this is partially out of nostalgia, as this was the first Mega Man game I ever beat, but going back to the original Mega Man always leaves me with a very solid time. It's a pretty short game and one that's not free from issues, but I still really like it at the end of the day. And I think the novelty of it being the first game is worth a playthrough in my opinion. But before I even begin, say it with me everybody. Fun fact, did you know that Mega Man had a troubling localization process to the point where the original name isn't even Mega Man? Actually, I kinda like it more than Rock Man. But regardless, in fact, Mega Man 1 did have a troubling localization process. Not in terms of the game itself, I mean the title screen changed. I think a few sound effects changed. Rather unimportant stuff when it comes to the game itself. But really, aside from the game itself, pretty much everything about Mega Man was changed. And as everyone knows, everything about these changes are really, really bad. Including the box art, the story, laugh. But let's be real, any Mega Man fan knows this, much less any Capcom fan. I don't think I need to go over it. So, according to the Japanese original game, the story of Mega Man is quite simple. This game is the inaugural adventure of Mega Man, aka Rockman, a service robot turned combat robot by Dr. Light. Why not just build a new robot, like what? But it turns out Dr. Light has a rival in Dr. Wily. Light believes in the use of robotics to help mankind, but in turn Dr. Wily is jealous of Dr. Light, and plans to conquer the world through robotics. So when Dr. Light creates 6 otherwise nice robots, Wily kidnaps them and reprograms them to conquer the world. And thus, after being modified by Dr. Light, Mega Man sets out for his first adventure. It's simple, to the point, and much less convoluted than whatever this Monsteropolis garbage was. But regardless if you like whatever Monsteropolis is, at its core, Mega Man is a very simple game and not very story-driven regardless. Unlike a majority of platformers at the time, Mega Man allows the player to choose from 6 stages. After selecting a stage, you're instantly thrust into the stage. Mega Man is about at his most basic here. He can jump, shoot, and move. Normally, this would otherwise leave it as a perfectly functional 80s platformer, but what sets Mega Man apart is its level design. In the first 6 stages, you'll find a decently satisfying mix of challenge and platforming, but where Mega Man really shines is in its weapon design. As you encounter a boss, you might find them a little tough to get to grips with, but eventually, after a little trial and error, you'll eventually defeat them and gain a weapon. In terms of the entire series, this weapon can be one of many things. An attack, a shield, even a power-up. But in the case of Mega Man 1, it skews more on the offensive side. Almost all of your weapons are projectile, but they vary in functionality in the stage and in boss fights. So for example, in the Elec Man stage, there's a secret on the ground which speeds up when you're at the same elevation as it. It can't be killed with a Mega Buster, but by using any given weapon, these enemies are killed in one hit, making the platforming much easier to handle. The way the weapons synergize with the level is crucial to how Mega Man works as a formula. In general, there are many points where otherwise difficult platforming sections can be trivialized with certain power-ups. And just as the weapons support the player in the stages, it also aids the bosses of Mega Man. Every Mega Man game has a weakness route, which when followed typically trivializes the boss in question. Of course, most people will typically look it up because it's the world's worst kept secret. But back in the 80s, this was a great way of increasing replay value. While the weakness chain may seem a bit hidden at first, once you take a look at the bosses, it makes a lot more sense. Furthermore, most weapons in Mega Man are useful regardless of the boss chosen, but only certain weapons trivialize the fight, which I found a nice balance. But typically whenever I do a run in this game, I like to go Cutman first as he takes the most damage from the Mega Buster, because rock beats scissors, followed with Elec Man, who is weak to rolling cutter, aka cutting electrical wires. Then Iceman is up next because electricity plus water equals bad, even though he's made of ice. But the fight is still pretty easy with the Elec Beam, so hey, I'll take it. But also, Elec Man has a very useful item called the Magnet Beam, which allows Mega Man to create a platform for his Buster. This is an especially useful stage in Iceman's stage, because fuck those stupid footholder things. Following that up with Fireman, because not only is the Ice Beam his weakness, it also freezes those fire pillars, which is pretty useful, especially when there's hidden goodies at the top. Then there's Bomb Man, another popular first pick, but it's one that only gets easier with Firestorm. This leaves us with the final stage, Guts Man, and while it can be tense as all hell with this first part, good god, with my route I can just use the Magnet Beam and skip over it. Seriously, this really is the best weapon in the game, don't skip on it. But also Gutsman's weakness is the bomb, which bombs break stone, so... Now sure, you could say, stick to the Mega Buster only, and I'm sure a lot of people will do that. I mean, it's not a bad weapon, you still have to use it for the first few parts of the game. Even sticking to the Mega Buster only takes out a core element of Mega Man's design. Not only are you giving yourself the hardest route because every Robot Master will be on the same playing field, but you also miss out on the secrets and the levels. Hell, in terms of Mega Man 1, there's one weapon that unambiguously shits on the Mega Buster, the Elec Beam. It pierces enemies, it does solid damage, and shoots in 3 directions, meaning that you can cover more ground by default. It's not as spammable as the regular Mega Buster, but that's far from a deterrent weakness. The Firestorm is another solid one, but it doesn't pack the same punch as the Elec Beam. But sadly, that's really as far as Mega Man 1 goes when it comes to good weapons. They're just too situational. They're not terrible weapons, but I just can't find the place to use them. There are some weapons that could have been awesome. The Ice Beam freezes enemies in place, but you can't do any damage with it, because in Mega Man 1 you can't open the weapon menu while a weapon is active, which is really stupid. which pretty much kills the Ice Beam's otherwise great utility. But then the other three I just never really liked using. The Rolling Cutter just has too little range, and while it does deal good damage, it's just not anything compared to the Mega Buster or even Elec Beam. And then there's the two weapons that really suck. There's the Bomb Man's weapon, which is powerful, but it's also just really slow to start up, and you can't do anything while it's out, so I just don't use it. But then there's also the worst weapon in the game thus far, and that's Gutsman's arm, and I really don't know the point of this weapon. You're supposed to grab rocks throughout the stages and throw them, but usually there's not a lot of rocks around. In fact, only 3 out of the 6 stages have rocks, one of them being Gutsman himself, so what's the point? And really, I can only say Cutman's stage has rocks, because in Elecman, the only rocks are to get the Magnet Beam. The only use case for this weapon is in Cutman's stage, because there's rocks everywhere, but I'd rather stick to my guns. You don't need a rock to toss, you just shoot your weapon, and that's that. Sure, Cutman is weak to the rocks, because again, rock beats scissors, but you know what else Cutman is weak to? The Mega Buster. Oh, wait, I wasn't done yet. This is the knockout punch. You know the Elec Beam? That also destroys rocks. Completely and utterly pointless. But this is one of the few chips Mega Man has on his shoulder. In terms of the stages themselves, aside from the rocks, I think Mega Man 1 has some pretty solid level design. The stages are short yet sweet, and the difficulty was definitely above average, but not too all unforgiving. Yes, every now and then Mega Man 1 can get a little tense, but the difficulty really isn't that high. But on occasion, I did find the levels to be too empty at points, and sometimes it can even bear repeating. For example, in Elec Man's stage, this stage is all about that verticality, which is a nice break, as Mega Man typically goes from left to right. But in Elec Man's stage, the verticality just becomes boring at some point. Most of your time spent here will be on the ladders rather than actually playing the game. And to add more fuel to the fire, there are alternative paths in this stage, but the issue is that they're blocked off. And I don't mean the entrance, I mean the exit. There is no way of knowing beforehand, unless you already play the game, that you can go at these exits, which feels frustrating and unintuitive. This one issue would probably make me leave it as the worst stage in Mega Man, but there is one unequivocally worse stage thanks to one goddamn enemy. Well, actually, one more thing. In Iceman stage, there are disappearing blocks, and does anyone like these? I genuinely need answers. But also, the worst enemy in the game rears its ugly head again. The Footholders. You might be confused if you never played this game, but anyone who has played Mega Man 1 knows the absolute demons these things are. And the issue in their design comes down to consistency. For the most part, every Mega Man game nails one thing down. You turn on the game, plow through it in a few hours, go back the next morning, and your strategy will largely be the same. Any variance in the game was caused by either you, the player, or other relatively unimportant elements, like health and weapon drops, which if you're actually good at the game, you won't need at all. Now take everything about that basic game design and throw it out the goddamn window, because these things are completely and utterly randomized. That's not a joke. Where they travel, when they shoot, hell, if you can even land on them safely to begin with, because of some scratch game hitbox detection. Needless to say, the only thing keeping me from not rage quitting here is the fact that the Magnet Beam exists. But you shouldn't need a power up to fix an otherwise broken and unfun obstacle. And they haven't had their last laugh yet, because it's time for the Wily stages. For the most part, the Wily stages are entirely tolerable, platforming-wise at least. The first stage is arguably the most challenging of the lot. It's pretty short for what it's worth, but it sports some awfully tight level design at points. But this short yet fun level is followed up by something terrible.
Bury the light deep within. Cast aside, there's no coming home. We're burning chaos in the wind. Drifting in the ocean all alone.
This fucking section. Yes, you're seeing this right. The intended way to cross this path is with these footholders. You jump from these RNG nightmares to the next, and if you get shot once, you're as good as dead, because in Mega Man 1, and only Mega Man 1, if you touch the spikes with iframes, you die instantly regardless, which is stupid, but it's only made worse here. But if you somehow manage to make it past here, you're treated to the worst surprise of them all. You remember the magnet beam? Yeah, you should have grabbed that earlier, but regardless, that's required to get past this segment. Why in the hell? The magnet beam is optional. If you don't have it, you genuinely can't do anything. And you're essentially forced to kill yourselves on the spike until you get a game over. And if you forgot that one little upgrade in Elec Man stage, you'll forever be wondering how to progress. This is bad enough on its own, as while the stage is relatively short, it's all the more frustrating to have your progress erased. But it gets even worse from then on out. Once you get past the god-awful footholder segment again, you get one of the worst bosses in series history. The Yellow Devil. This chunky-ass yellow blob is so abysmal that he not only ruined this stage, but he ruined a completely different stage in another game. And it's not because he's hard, because in all honesty, he's really simple to take down. He always has the same pattern, and he will follow it until he dies. It might do massive damage, but it's still not all that bad. The problem is that fighting him is a war of attrition. Once he fully forms, you have about 5 seconds to fire off a few shots. Then he goes into his attack phase in which you can't hit him. But this lasts like 30 seconds. And if you're on the last sliver of health and you die, it is the worst feeling in the entire world. This might not only be the worst boss in Mega Man 1, but also the worst boss in the classic series. It's just not fun. It's not well designed or clever. You're just doing the same thing over and over again. Shoot his eye and hope you don't die in the process. It's not fun. It's not well designed. It's just bad. This stage sucks. I can't. This is really the only dud in Mega Man's level design, because I think pretty much every stage in this game is at least good. But this stage's design is just so back-ass where it's at the final moment. At this point, don't even bother fighting the Yellow Devil normally. Just use the pulse glitch and get it over with. Trust me, I've done it, you've done it, everyone's done it who's beaten this game. Just do it. Okay, thankfully, the Wily stages largely chill out from here. Wily Stage 2 mostly consists of boss refights, and then Wily Stage 3 is just one more boss of its own. Then the final few refights before fighting Dr. Wily in Wily Stage 4 are pretty easy. You have all your weapons, there's pretty much no excuse to not use them, you should pretty much do this no hit. As for Wily Stage 3, it's honestly kind of nothing. The boss is super easy, you can use its weakness, and it takes like all of 30 seconds. Nothing too hard, and to be honest, I'm glad the Yellow Devil really took out a lot of energy in me. But after you complete the rest of the Wily stages, you finally get here in the moment you've been waiting for. honestly one of the easier fights in the game. It's not a bad fight, it's just kind of weirdly easy. And also, once again, you can just pause glitch him to death within seconds, so... With that, the day is saved, and Mega Man can finally go home to see his family again. Although, interestingly, this is the first and only time we see Roll in game. Yeah, for whatever reason, she's just never seen again in the NES saga after this. But regardless, I think Mega Man 1 was a pretty good game. That's about it. It's a game that I largely enjoy, but as I just mentioned, has some major problems with, which does bring down the experience a few pegs or so. But as one of the earlier NES games, I can forgive it. Overall, it's a game I can say I can recommend to newcomers and current fans alike, but it's one I feel is unfairly avoided. It's not too strenuous as a game, and I think it was pretty fun for what it's worth. And also, it's pretty short, so there's really no reason to not check it out if you're a Mega Man fan. I wouldn't say it's a must-play, but I think it's worth a play at the very least, especially since it largely holds up to date, and also, seeing where the series started is definitely worthwhile. I've replayed Mega Man 1 a few times at this point, and I think it's a pretty satisfying game to romp through every now and again, so do check it out if you can. But, there's also the case of Mega Man 2. Mega Man 1 obviously isn't an ideal game. It's good, no doubt, but it's just missing that small little polish that could have made it genuinely incredible. Well, someone at Capcom thought so too, because look alive, Mega Man 2 is next. But that's a story for another time. Hey guys, it's zeusdeegoose here. Thanks for watching the video. This is part 1 of the classic Mega Man saga, and I really enjoyed making it. I'll be uploading Mega Man 2 probably sometime this month, if not later down the line. I'm really happy with how this video came out in general, and I hope you did too. If you like this video, please give it a like and share it with your friends if you can. But if you dislike it, please let me know and just tell me what I can improve, so we'll be better prepared for Mega Man 2. Once again, I know this is like one of my first videos, so it's probably going to be a lot worse than my future videos. So feedback will be well appreciated. I'll put a Google form in the description just so I can gauge some interest here. Also, if you're wondering about that whole Super Meat Boy retrospective, it's still in the works, just I gotta give it a bit more time. I want to finish Mega Man, at least the classic series, the first 6 NES games first, before I do like another big video like that. Super Meat Boy will not at all be like Mega Man. At most, there's going to be 2 videos, but I really, if I could, I'll get it down to 1. Because in Super Meat Boy's case, there's only one really good game I have to cover there, and the rest are kind of just shit. So, that'll be a fun video to make. And also, I did take a bit of a hiatus on that For Glory channel. I don't know, I just don't really have the motivation to do it anymore. Maybe I'll come back to it one day, but we'll have to see. I really did enjoy making that first video though, and I think I could do it again if I really push myself to. I might get more help on that in the future, because I feel like being a one-man job and having like 2 channels is kind of not what I want to do, especially when I'm putting out videos that are as long as this one on the regular. For Glory will be about 7 to 10 minutes per video, but it's still like 40 minutes a month, which is a lot for me, especially as someone who does not know how to use editing software very well. But that's about all I have to say right now. I'm gonna keep making this Mega Man marathon. And I hope you stay by, because I think it's gonna be pretty sick. So, in the meantime, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Follow me on Twitter. I do still use Twitter a little bit, but not as much. Probably just to post videos there. That's really about it. So, tune in next time for more Goose.